So guys, very interesting news with Matchroom doing a casino bill in Monte Carlo. First, thanks again to everyone who messaged me to let me know about the news. A few people got in touch via different means, so really appreciate the heads up. I think it was Dan who got it over to me first, so shout out to you, Dan. And Matchroom have announced a bill in a casino in Monte Carlo, and it's going to be headlined by Luis King Kong Ortiz versus Malik Scott. The co-main event is going to be Arthur Abraham versus Martin Murray in a rematch. And on the undercard, Stephen Smith in a world title fight against Sosa, and Jamie McDonnell against Solis in a world title fight. So, an interesting bill, and again, Eddie Hearn's full of surprises this week. This is not one that I personally saw coming. You know, I did a video on Luis Ortiz joining Matchroom yesterday, and I said, I hope they keep him active, I hope they keep him busy, and fair play to Eddie Hearn. No sooner has the signing been announced and he's made a fight. And he's made the fight, I believe it's November the 12th, although you'll have to check that, don't take my word for that. So he's made the fight to get Luis Ortiz out pretty much straight away. I mean, it's the 10th of October today at the time of filming, and he's fighting the 12th of November. So big fight. Let's go down the card. We'll start with the main event. And I guess let's start with Monte Carlo. I don't know much about the business out in Monte Carlo. My perception of it is that it's always been black tie casino events where tickets sell for a huge amount of money, but you maybe don't get the biggest crowd. And potentially that's the route that Eddie Hearn's gone down for this card, because let's be honest, Luis Ortiz, Stephen Smith, Martin Murray, you know, they're well-known fighters, but they're probably not guys who are going to be selling out arenas in the UK. So I don't know what the business model is out there. I don't know how it works to be financially efficient, but this is clearly an expensive card to put on. I mean, Malik Scott is not going to be a cheap opponent to bring over. Luis Ortiz is going to want a fee. Arthur Abraham is used to earning a lot of money, and surprising that he's not fighting in Germany because he's got a huge following there. And obviously, Stephen Smith, Sosa, McDonnell, they're lesser fights potentially, but they are still world title fights. So this is going to cost a fair few quid for Eddie Hearn to put on. It's not going to be on pay-per-view. It's not going to sell out 20,000 tickets in the UK. So anyone who knows about the business model and knows how this is a financially viable model, I'd be interested to find out more. So do leave that in the comments section below. I would presume that people in Monte Carlo are prepared to spend £1,000 or £2,000 on a ticket to sit in a black tie event for boxing. You know, maybe that's what it is. But if you know more about that than I do, leave a comment below. But let's talk about the fights. Let's go down the card, and we'll start with Ortiz versus Malik Scott. Malik Scott is someone who gets a lot of stick and a lot of criticism in the heavyweight division. I, for one, have always admired him and always liked him as a fighter. He has had 2 losses to Derek Chisora and Deontay Wilder, and on both occasions he's been accused of quitting. And it is possibly true that in the past Malik Scott hasn't shown the greatest punch resistance, and perhaps has taken a way out of fights where other fighters may have stayed up, particularly in the Derek Chisora fight, where, you know, did he miss the count, did he not miss the count, did he miss the count on purpose, etc. But on his day, Malik Scott is a very skilled boxer, and I love to see silky smooth skills in the heavyweight division. He's not got much power, and he hasn't shown much chin, so I can understand why people in the sport are slightly critical of him. But he's coming off 2 fairly decent victories. He beat Alex Leopai widely, and he beat Tony Thompson as well. And those are 2 fairly adequate victories in the context of the heavyweight division. They certainly, for me, put Malik Scott somewhere in the top 20. And this is an interesting fight against Luis Ortiz. Fundamentally, you've got to say it's a one-sided matchup, because what has Malik Scott really got to trouble Luis Ortiz? I mean, he's not going to have the power to hurt Luis Ortiz, and the question is, will he have the chin, will he have the heart, will he have the durability to stand up to what has previously shown to be the devastating power of Luis Ortiz? You know, Malik Scott's history is when that sort of power is put on him, he tends to wilt. So the question is, will he find anything different against Luis Ortiz at this stage of his career? And based on the form book, you'd have to say that that's potentially unlikely. So Luis Ortiz will start as a favourite, but I'm delighted that he's getting out so quickly on a Matchroom show. And I'm delighted to see him active and kept busy. I think that's really important. And it's great to see him against a recognised name, a guy coming off 2 wins, against top 50 opposition. You know, I was worried we may see him in against the type of opponent that David Price has been feeding on recently, and that's something that no one wants to see, especially given Ortiz's advanced age. So, you know, it's a good sign, and it's a fight that will interest me. I don't think there's anyone out there who'll be picking Malik Scott, and I don't think it's truly a competitive matchup. But even if it's not competitive, it's at least somewhat meaningful. You know, Malik Scott is a ranked guy, he's a known fighter, he's a commodity, and he brings some tools to the table. Stylistically, the kind of guy who's going to beat Luis Ortiz isn't a light punching, moving jabber. You know, for me, I see it as a stylistic, positive matchup for Luis Ortiz. But I'll certainly watch the fight. Moving down the card, Martin Murray versus Arthur Abraham. I actually said that I'd heard a strong rumour this fight was going to be made on the podcast last week. And it's a fight that, you know, is a bit bizarre, really. Obviously, these guys fought before for a world title. Now they're rematching without a world title on the line. And I believe it's some sort of eliminator, potentially, for Ramirez's world title. I mean, you know, if Arthur Abraham was to win, as he did in the first fight, I don't think there's too many people queuing up to see Ramirez-Abraham 2. That was a very one-sided fight first time round. But then again, I need to check it is certainly a eliminator for that belt. I would just believe that it was. But yeah, Murray-Abraham, it's a bit of an odd fight, really. Murray's coming off a few losses. He obviously lost to George Groves, lost to Arthur Abraham. And Arthur Abraham's had a comeback fight where he won. And I was under the impression Arthur Abraham was a major star and a major ticket seller in Germany. So I'm slightly confused as to why he would take a fight in Monte Carlo against Martin Murray. You know, if it's some sort of eliminator for the world title, I guess he's incentivised to do that. But you'd think that he'd be wanting to get the fight in Germany and wanting to fight in front of his home fans and his home judges, etc. So it's a fight that doesn't really make too much sense to me. And it's a fight, if I'm honest, that I'm not hugely excited to see again. I thought Martin Murray gave the best account of himself he could have possibly given in the first fight. And I thought Abraham still had enough to edge it in a dodgy performance from Abraham. But I just felt Abraham was so much more eye-catching and so much more heavy-handed with his work that the high-output, low-power approach of Martin Murray just wasn't working. And, you know, since then, Martin Murray's had a tough fight with George Groves. He's got a few more miles on the clock. He's wrapped up another loss. And he's someone who's consistently failed to get the W at this sort of level. So, you know, I guess there's questions as to what other routes are there for Martin Murray at this stage. And I guess there's probably aren't. You know, there probably aren't that many massive fights out there for him right now. So I can understand why they'd want to fight. I'm just not really sure why Arthur Abraham wants to fight. And for me, it's kind of hard to see Martin Murray reversing the form. You know, if I look at the fight last time round, I think Abraham, who deserved to win, could have put up a hell of a lot better performance. And I think Murray, who deserved to lose, put in a pretty peak performance as far as I'm concerned from him. So do I see that as an overly intriguing fight? No. Overly competitive, you know, but then again, it is a sort of high-level co-main event, and it's certainly something that I'll watch. Jamie McDonnell and Stephen Smith, both fighting in world title fights. Good management from Eddie Hearn to be able to get Stephen Smith a world title shot again so quickly. It's good to see our UK fighters getting opportunities like this. I'm not going to lie, Sosa, I've heard the name, I know he's highly rated. I am not going to pretend I've sat down and watched loads of his fights before making this video, as is the case with Jamie McDonnell's opponent. So I'm not going to talk in too much depth about how I see those fights going, because quite frankly I'd be making it up. I'll bring it up on the podcast. I'm sure some of the podcast guys would have seen more of them than I have, so we can have that discussion there. But, you know, it's actually not a bad bill, this. You've got a big heavyweight headliner, you've got a big co-main event rematch, and then you've got 2 world title fights in the lower weight classes on the undercard. So not a bad bill. Can't imagine it was too cheap to work together, to put together, and not really the sort of classic type of fight night that Matchroom have been putting on, which is interesting. It's interesting to see someone different. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing Luis Ortiz making his Sky debut. And you know, some of those other fights could develop into intriguing scraps. So big news. Let me know your thoughts. Which one of the matchups are you most looking forward to? How are you predicting the fights will go? And if you've got some idea as to why Eddie Hearn is doing a show in Monte Carlo and how the financial model works for putting on a show of this nature, do leave your comments below. I'd be fascinated to hear more. If this is news to you, please hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't done so before, take the time to subscribe so you can check out all of my other videos. Thanks a lot, guys.